Welcome back, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about adding integers. So for instance, how do we add something like -4 plus 2? Or how do we add something like -6 plus -3? Right? So how do we incorporate these negatives for addition? I'm going to show you a few different strategies that you can use here. So strategy number one. So strategy number one is going to be to use a number line. So we can do the following. So let's do an example. I think it's easiest to see these with examples. So let's do the two above. I'm trying to do my spacing as evenly as possible. I know it's not perfect, but you do want to make sure your number line, the spacing is supposed to be even. So ideally you would use graph paper or something like that here, which I don't think I mentioned in the last video. So what you want to do, and there's different ways to think about this, but this is how I do it when I use a number line, is I take my first number, and this is your starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph this first. So I'm just going to put a little, I'll use a red little spot here at -4. And then I'm going to use my second number as my movement. So this is how to move. So what happens is if it's positive, you're going to move to the right. And if it's negative, you're going to move to the left. So here I have a +2. So positive means to the right. So I'm going to move 2 units right. So in this case, I'm going to move 2 spots right. Okay, so I take my starting value, I'm going to move 1, 2, +2 to the right. And wherever I land, that is my answer. So my answer here then is -2. Let's do the other example, -6 plus -3. Now I definitely have a lot more negatives here, so I'm just going to my 0 a little bit to the right so I have more room. All right, so I'm going to start here. And again, this is usually how I do it. Some people have you start at 0 and then count the -6 first, which you can do it that way. I just think it's a little faster to start wherever that first number is. So I'm going to start here at the -6. And then my second number here is how I'm going to move. Now notice that it is a -3. So if it's negative, we're going to move left, right? Because your negatives are towards the left. So we're going to move left 3 spots. So I start here, I go left 1, 2, 3. So that's that -3 change. And wherever I end up, that is my answer. So that's how you can add or subtract using a number line. So let me try one more example with you guys. How about we do 8 plus -5? Now this is a great time to pause that video and just give it a try on your own. So see if you can do it first. So here I'm starting at 8. And my second number is how I'm going to move. And notice it's a negative, so I'm going to go left 5 spots. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the left, and wherever I end up is my answer. So that's our first strategy. We can add or subtract using a number line. This is a great way to begin working with adding and subtracting with positives and negatives so you can visualize what's happening. So as you're getting to harder numbers, if you get stuck, think about it. If you're adding something positive, you're moving to the right. If you're adding something negative, you're moving further to the left. So it's just kind of a nice way to think about how that change is occurring physically on a number line. So what's happening visually as well. So strategy number two, you can call it maybe making a positive and negative chart. I feel like some people may also call it like a chip counter. You had, little chips that you were using here as well if you did it more physically. So let's go back to our same examples, and I'll show you how this one works. So our first example was -4 + 2. So what we do is we actually write out the symbols. So here I have -4. So this means I have 4 negatives. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And this one here is +2. So that means I have 2 positives. So 1, 2. And what happens is that things that are doubled are going to cancel out. So 1 positive plus 1 negative cancels out. So think of it like this. If I have $1 and then I spend the dollar, now I have $0. So that's what this is happening here. I have $1 and I'm spending the dollar, so I have $0. So these cancel out. And then what happens is whatever you have left over is your answer. So in this case, I have 2 negatives left. So my answer is -2. All right, so let's do it again. So here I have 6 negatives. And then I have 3 more negatives. So let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. And I'm going to put my negatives in the same column. And then I have 1, 2, 3. So notice that I have none cancel out, right? Because I don't have any positives to cancel with. So I have everything left over. And what do I have left? Well, I have 9 negatives now. So my answer is -9. And let's do our last example. So 8 plus -5. So I have 8 positives. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This up a little bit for you guys. And then I have 5 negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're going to cancel. And then what you're noticing is that your leftover is 3 positives. So our answer is just +3. Okay. So those are 2 visual ways that you can think about how to add positives and negatives. Now, what I encourage you to do for a second is maybe pause the video and see if you can see a pattern. Because what I'm going to give you next is the third strategy, which is sort of our shortcut strategy just to get the answer without having to draw all the pictures. Because that's where you want to go, right? So it's good to draw the pictures if you're getting stuck or to understand better. But you really want to be able to do this quickly and almost automatically, very fast in your head. So I'm going to show you the last strategy. But if you look through, again, try to pause the video first and see if you can find it on your own. But notice that, and this is kind of an easy one to see it here, I think, that when we were adding all negatives, nothing ended up canceling out. So we basically just added all those negatives together. You could see that I have 6 plus 3 is 9, and I kept that negative sign. When I was adding things with different signs, then I had stuff canceling out. So I was canceling things out. Now notice what happened here. So forget about the sign for a second. 4 minus 2 is 2. 8 minus 5 is 3. So when we have some positive, some's negative, we get it canceling. It's almost like we're doing a subtraction problem there, not an addition problem. And then what happens is whatever you have more of, here I have more positives, here I had more negatives, that's the final sign at the end. And that idea is going to bring us to our last strategy. I'm going to call this standard algorithm. Standard algorithm is a term we use. We basically are just showing you the rules or the steps. So standard algorithm is sort of the fast way. It's like, okay, after we understand the process and we've kind of found the patterns, what's the quick way we can get the answer? That's always your standard algorithm. So here are our two rules. So the first one is when you add numbers with the same sign, you're going to add numbers and keep the sign. So for example, -4 plus -5. I'm going to add the number, they're both the negatives. So if I add the numbers 4 plus 5, I get 9 and I keep the sign. Okay? And that is what I saw. So let me find that example. What we do, -6 plus -3. We already did this one. 6 plus 3 is 9, and they're both negative, so it stays. And if you go back to your other strategies, we can see we already show that using the number line and using that positive and negative chart. And we can extend this. So let's say I had something like -1 plus -2 plus -3. Well, now I have still all negatives, so I can add them up. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 again is 6, so I have 6 negatives. And of course, this works for positives too. If you were adding 5 plus 2, it would still be 7. 1 plus 8 would still be positive 9, and so on. So when you're building in mathematics, you should never change the old rules you already have. We should just be expanding on them. So let's say we add numbers with different signs. So what you end up doing is you subtract the numbers and take the sign of the number with the bigger absolute value. So you can also think of this as take the sign of whatever we have or of, meaning do you have more positives or more negatives? So let's do a couple examples here, and let's start with the ones we've already done. And then that way you can compare and see that we do know the answer there. So we did -4 plus 2, and we did negative. So here I have different signs. One's negative, one's positive in both cases. So what you do is you actually subtract the numbers because again, they kind of work against each other. You're going to have some canceling there. So 4 minus 2 is 2, 8 minus 5 is 3. And then you take the sign of the number with the bigger absolute value. So if I think about this here, the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. The absolute value of 2 is 2. This one is obviously bigger. So you take the negative sign. Here, the absolute value of 8 is 8. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. This one is the bigger one. So it was positive. We leave it positive. Another way I like to think of it is, and I think this is a little bit easier than thinking about absolute values, is whatever you have more of. So for instance, here, I have 4 negatives and 2 positives. I have more negatives, obviously, so my answer will be negative. Here I have 8 positives and 5 negatives. So I have more positives, my answer will be positive. And you can expand this and make even harder problems. So maybe I had something like negative 25 plus 14. I have different signs, so I'm going to subtract. Now, if you need to do it off to the side, you can do it off to the side. Subtract our values and we get 11. I have 25 negatives and 14 positives, so I have way more negatives. So my answer is going to be negative 11. Or maybe I have 36 plus negative 20. Again, I have different signs, so I'm going to subtract. 36 minus 20 is going to be 16. Here I have 36 positives and 20 negatives, so I have way more positives, so it will stay positive. Notice that when I subtract, though, I'm not worried about the positive and negative at the time. I'm just going to subtract the numbers. So even though I know negative 25 is smaller than 14, I'm still going to subtract regularly and then do the negative sign at the end. So when you're adding or subtracting your values, just do the addition or subtraction without the sign and then bring the sign back in later on. All right, and then one last thing I want to note here. So if A is a number, then negative A is its opposite. And what happens is when we add opposites, they cancel each other out. So for instance, A plus negative A will be 0, and negative A plus A will be 0. Now, sometimes we put parentheses around our negatives, but you don't have to. It's just to make it clearer. So I could have written this problem like this if I wanted to. Instead, it doesn't matter. It just makes it a little bit clearer. So for example, here, if I was doing 5 plus negative 5, the answer would be 0. Or if I have something like negative 10 plus 10, the answer is 0. So exact opposites will totally cancel out when you're adding them, which is key. Let's just do a couple more examples that are a little bit more involved. So let's say I wanted to add more than 2 digits, or 2 values. Maybe I want to add negative 10 plus 11 plus negative 5. Now, for adding is commutative. So you could do this in any order you want to. So a lot of students, if they're just doing addition, so again, this is important that it's all addition. So remember, addition is commutative and associative. So that means that we can rearrange and we can regroup as we want to. So what a lot of people will do is they'll put their same signs together. So they'll do their negative 10 plus negative 5 first. And because they're the same sign, we can just add them and get negative 15. So my problem now becomes negative 15 plus 11. And now that I have different signs, remember we're going to subtract. 15 minus 11 is 4. And then I have more negatives, so it would be -4. So we're applying both of those rules here together. So maybe I have 20 plus -6 plus -8 plus -5. Again, it's all addition, which is important. Once I start bringing in different operations, I have to go in order. I have to use order of operations. But if it's all addition, because addition is commutative and associative, I can rearrange it. So what I can do here is I can group all my negatives first. So -6 plus -8 plus -5. They're all negatives, so we can just add them up. 6 plus 8 plus 5 is going to be 19 here. And then it's going to stay negative. So my problem becomes 20 plus -19. And I have different signs, so now I subtract, I get 1. 20 is, so I have 20 positives and 19 negatives, so I have more positives. So my answer is 1. We can bring in a little bit of evaluating here, just kind of keep using those skills we've already learned. So I'm going to evaluate. So I'm going to replace my x here with 5. And I'm going to replace my y, -6. So don't forget, if two things are touching, it's multiplication. So it's 2 times 5 plus, and then -6. And again, I like to use parentheses when I evaluate. It just helps to remind me where I need to multiply. So I do have to follow order of operations. So I do my multiplication first, which is 10. And then I have 10 plus -6. Now these are different signs, so I have to subtract. And I have 10 positives and 6 negatives, so I have more positives, so this will stay positive. Okay, and we can also bring in some real-world applications here. So let's say I went to my bank account and I withdrew $10 from my bank account for lunch, and then another $20 later for the movies. How did my bank balance change? My bank account balance changed. So for the first case, if we're withdrawing, that means we're taking it away. So this is a -10. And then we're withdrawing another 20. So that's -20. So I'm looking at -$10 plus -$20. These are the same signs, so I can just add them, and I see -30. So our bank balance has changed by -$30. It's gone down $30. So let's say that the temperature at noon was 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's one of those really cold New England days. How about that? The temperature changed by -15 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. what is the current temperature? So what we have here, we're starting at positive 10 degrees, and then we're changing it by negative 15 degrees. So we're going to add it with negative 15. And the current temperature then, these are different signs we would subtract, and I have more negatives. So my current temperature is negative 5 degrees Fahrenheit. We can also draw a picture here if that helps. So let's say I have my little thermometer, okay? And here's 0, and I'm up here at 10 degrees. And I'm going to change by negative 15. So if I'm going down by negative 15, well, here's negative 10 change, and then I need another negative 5 change. So I will eventually get to that negative 5 degrees to get that full negative 15 degree change.